The situation in Panama seems to be coming to a gel. CBS News correspondent David Martin is at the Pentagon. David, what's the latest from there?
Dan, it appears that the U.S. is on the verge, if it has not already begun, some sort of military operation in Panama, apparently with the purpose of removing Manuel Noriega. At the Pentagon tonight, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney has been here almost all night. When you walk by his office from time to time, you can see people running in and out. It is clear that something is up, and it's more, I think, than just a show of force or some sort of reinforcement of as we've had in the past in Panama.
David, we were on the air a little bit earlier saying to people that it was reported to CBS News in Washington that some sort of U.S. government statement, possibly from the White House, was expected within the next 15 or 20 minutes now. Also, there is this report from Dateline Panama City, which let me pause to give our viewers here, from the Reuters News Service. And I quote now, the slug on this story is gunfire and explosion near Panama's military headquarters. From the Reuters News Service, gunfire and explosions were heard in the area near Panamanian leader General Manuel Antonio Noriega's headquarters early Wednesday. That would be Panamanian time. Panamanian time is roughly the same as Central Time in the United States. David, there were these unusual troop movements all during the afternoon and evening into the Panama Canal Zone.
Well, if we are to believe all the reports that we have heard tonight, units have been moving from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Ord, California. Now, some of that may simply be a diversion to distract both our attention and that of the Panamanians. But clearly, troops are moving. Airplanes have been seen arriving in quick succession at Howard Air Force Base in Panama. Troops are going into Panama, and if the Reuters report is accurate, may already have gone into action.
At the White House is CBS News White House correspondent Wyatt Andrews. Wyatt, what about these reports that some statement can be expected from the White House sometime early this morning Eastern Time?
Dan, that is apparently the case. Reporters have been summoned by the White House procedure that is called the call-out. And obviously, this being just after 1 in the morning East Coast time, they're not doing this lightly. We do not know whether to expect the president at this point or White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater. But obviously, all of the signs point to some sort of major military action by U.S. forces in Panama. I should point out, Dan, that this comes on the heels of a long, off-the-books, if you will, meeting today that took place at the White House. The evidence that something big was afoot came when Attorney General Richard Thornburg missed a press conference, and we were told later that he was here talking about the legal justifications for the use of U.S. troops in the drug war.
Wyatt, excuse me for one moment.
Yes.
Dateline Panama City, this now according to United Press International, we're giving you these reports as we receive them here. U.S. troops engaged Panamanian soldiers in fighting early Wednesday at the jointly operated U.S. and Panamanian forces Fort Amador military base. This is according to the United Press International, and it is quoting military television from Panama City. Now, on the phone from Panama City is our veteran correspondent Juan Vasquez. Just before we go to Vasquez, for those of you who just may have tuned over or may be a little confused about events, this is CBS News live special report about the situation that appears to be developing in Panama. Explosions and gunfire are reported to be heard. That was according to the Reuters wire service just a short while ago. Now UPI, quoting military television, says that U.S. troops have engaged Panamanian soldiers near Fort Amador. A statement is expected from the White House sometime soon. On our map here, perhaps you can see this is a layout of Panama City and the Panama Canal Zone. You can see Fort Amador. That is one of the jointly operated military bases there. Now, we were saying that a statement is expected from the White House sometime shortly, and those are the developments up to date. Now, let's go to Juan Vasquez, who is in Panama City. If you note that Juan Vasquez is speaking in a low voice, his situation is such as that he could be in some danger, and therefore he's keeping his voice down. Juan, where are you and what's the situation?
I'm in a hotel room in the Marriott, Dan. And what is happening is earlier today, about 10 C-130s started landing at Howard Air Force Base. And we have seen a lot of movement at Howard Air Force Base. The C-130s, we could not tell what they were unloading. We believe it to be both cargo and military personnel. There were a lot of Black Hawk helicopters on the ground as well. There was a lot of activity. It is still continuing. The so-called dignity battalions that General Noriega has armed, which he says would be used as shock troops in case of an invasion, have been summoned by national television to go to their duty stations. The phrase that was put out over national television last night was arms to your shoulders, arms to your shoulders.
Juan, if I may, I hate to interrupt you there. Juan Vasquez reporting live from Panama City. And Juan, if you can stay with us, if the situation there at your hotel gets any more dangerous, of course, we'd understand if you were not at the microphone when we came back to you. But this is a bulletin from the Associated Press, Dateline, Panama City. U.S. tanks and truckloads of American soldiers headed toward Panama's military headquarters Wednesday night. That would be Panamanian time. Mortar and machine gun fire was heard. Continuing to quote the Associated Press, 3 young Panamanian soldiers told an AP reporter, quote, "There is all kinds of hell loose out there," unquote. The reporter says he saw 24 U.S. tanks and at least 4 trucks carrying American troops head in the direction of the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters. Now, going again to our map, the presidential palace, we have no indication as to whether that's where Manuel Noriega is. This gives you the layout. The U.S. Embassy up to the right of the screen, the presidential palace down near the water, the Panamanian Defense Force, that's PDF barracks over to one side, the U.S. Southern Command headquarters up. Now, Fort Armador is not too far from these locations. Fort Armador is that joint Panamanian-U.S. base where some fighting has been reporting. We should add that within the last 3 or 4 hours, there have been unconfirmed reports of U.S. planes and helicopters heard over Panama City. Those reports did come from Panamanian forces. Now, let's pause. This appears to be the situation in Panama City at the moment. Gunfire, including mortar fire, has been heard. U.S. troops are said to be moving toward what they believe to be Noriega's headquarters for the moment. And U.S. troops are reported by one wire service to be engaging Panamanian troops. Let's go back to Juan Vasquez in his hotel in Panama City. Juan, as much as you can, and we recognize you have to keep your voice down there, be candid about what the dangers are and what the situation is exactly where you are at this moment.
We hear a lot of shouting outside our door in the hotel room. Earlier this morning, some armed men, civilians in masks, carrying rifles, entered into the hotel lobby shouting. There's still a lot of shouting going on in the hotel lobby. We hear it. We don't know what's happening. At one point, I thought I heard a man ordering someone to identify the North Americans and to identify the Panamanians. So we don't quite know. Our door is closed, but we do hear a lot of activity outside, a lot of shouting. I do have to say we have heard no shooting here at our hotel.
Juan, any indication who those people are who entered the hotel with masks and weapons? Any indication as to who they might be?
Well, as far as I can tell, they did not identify themselves. Repeat, they did not identify themselves. But as I said earlier, members of the Dignity, this happened just after the national television called members of the Dignity battalions to put a certain plan into operation. They gave a code word for it, and then they said, arms to your shoulders, arms to your shoulders.
Juan, if you can't stand by there, we want to go back to David Martin at the Pentagon. David, these reports now from at least one wire service that U.S. troops have actually engaged Panamanian troops. First, is there any confirmation of that at the Pentagon?
Well, I can't get it from here, Dan. I haven't been able to make a check on that. So we have to go with UPI for the moment.
And what kind of U.S. forces do we have in Panama, with particular emphasis on what kind of forces were moved in there today?
Well, before any movements were started, there were 12,000 U.S. forces there, including some light infantry brigades, and also some special operations forces. They have apparently moved some Army Rangers, which is a very elite light infantry unit. They have apparently readied for movement the 7th Infantry Division, or parts of the 7th Infantry Division, from Fort Ord, California. I believe it is true that the Delta Force has been moved into Panama, and that apparently would be for the purpose of either isolating or somehow attempting to seize Manuel Noriega, who, after all, is wanted in the U.S. on drug charges.
And David, there were reports late in the day that some days ago, at least elements of the U.S. Delta Force had been moved into Panama. Those reports confirmed?
Well, I think they're true, Dan. I can't tell you 100% because, as you can imagine, before one of these operations, you don't get entirely straight answers to your questions. I think Delta is in there with the mission of seizing Noriega, and I think the ultimate objective here is to, one way or the other, get rid of Manuel Noriega and install the opposition which ran against him in last May's election and by all accounts won until he annulled the results.
David, from the people you've been talking to over a period of time about this, was it the goal of the mission, when it materializes, as it apparently has tonight, was it to kill Noriega or snatch him?
I think the optimum result would be to bring him to the United States to stand trial. However, they don't have to worry very much about violating the ban against assassinations because were he killed in whatever is going on now, it, I think, could be described as a case of a fugitive fleeing arrest and not a case of assassination. Besides, Manuel Noriega, at least in the eyes of the United States, is not a head of state because we, of course, don't recognize him as the legitimate ruler of Panama.
Thank you, David Martin at the Pentagon. You are watching live CBS News coverage of reported fighting between U.S. troops and Panamanian troops in Panama City. So far, that has been reported by only one wire service, but 3 wire services, AP, UPI, and Reuters, seem to be in agreement that a combat situation is at the very least beginning to develop in Panama between U.S. troops and the Panamanian Defense Forces of Manuel Noriega. Joining us now is our CBS News consultant, United States Army General Frederick Werner, who recently retired as chief of the U.S. Southern Command in Panama. He retired this last October. General, thank you for being with us, of course. And from the sketchy reports you've heard so far, what kind of action appears to be underway?
It appears that the troops were initially deployed in a show of force, but for some reason, a decision has been made to commit those forces. That could have been initiated by the president, or it could be in reaction to actions by the Panamanian Defense Forces.
General, you have said on several occasions, and anyone who's seen any combat at any level knows that primarily in this kind of situation, the military has 2 options, surprise or overwhelming force. Was it your impression from what we saw and heard during the afternoon that surprise was the original intent or not?
Even when the principle of force, of numbers, mass, is employed, you still try to gain as much surprise as you can, but your entire operation is not based solely on the attainment of surprise. So given the time delay between the reported arrival of the airplanes and the initiation of contact as signaled by the firing, I would presume that surprise was not the predominant element.
General, as you heard, Associated Press reports that U.S. tanks and truckloads of American troops were heading toward Panama's military headquarters, mortar and machine gun fire being heard. Would there be any possibility that kind of movement would take place without U.S. air cover, planes and helicopters?
Highly unlikely. A fundamental principle is to always have air cover, and air cover is available in Panama.
And what about the fleet? We were unable to determine today whether the fleet had been moved, but again, would it or would it not be likely that they would undertake this kind of operation of moving U.S. troops into Panama City without a fleet movement having been made accordingly?
No, an operation of this scale could be supported by air. The naval forces would not absolutely be required.
General, you know Panama City and the Panama Canal Zone very well. Where on the map are the places to watch, keeping in mind that there has been this report of fighting between U.S. troops and Panamanian troops at Fort Armador, that jointly held base?
Yes, the areas to be particularly attentive to for the next few hours is Fort Amador, which is just off the left side of the screen from the viewer's perspective. And I have a new map up on the screen now. Let me just go over to there. It is right at the entrance to the canal on the Pacific side. That's on the bottom right-hand side of the screen.
General, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we do have new information. If you can hold there with us, we'll pass this along and get back to you, please. This now updating Associated Press, State Line, Panama City, Panama. Mortar, machine gun, and cannon fire is being heard in the capital as U.S. tanks and truckloads of American troops headed toward Panama's military headquarters. Planes and helicopters were flying over Panama City. This movement, according to the Associated Press, indicated U.S. forces were attempting to force Panama's military leader, General Manuel Antonio Noriega, out of power. 3 young Panamanian soldiers, as we quoted them before, this is a repeat of a previous AP story, say there is all kinds of hell loose out there. That's a direct quote. An AP reporter says he saw at least 24 U.S. tanks and at least 4 trucks carrying American troops head in the direction of the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters. Troops in olive uniforms, these are identified by AP as troops, ran through the luxury Marriott Hotel, and lights in the hotel went out. That corresponds to Juan Vasquez's report a moment ago from the hotel. Channel 8, the television station of the U.S. Southern Command, issued an echo level alert. That's said to be its highest, and said movement by unauthorized U.S. personnel was prohibited. That was U.S. Armed Forces television broadcasting that from the U.S. Southern Command. Now, let's go back to General Werner for just a moment. General Wyatt Andrews is standing by at the White House, where a statement is expected fairly shortly. This echo alert issued by the U.S. Southern Command, what are we to make of that?
That is the highest state of alert that can be issued by Southern Command, and what it instructs all civilian personnel to stay in place, do not try to report to work, just stay where they are, and it calls for the availability of all the military forces. It is the highest state of alert possible.
Thank you, General Werner. There is shooting reported now by Juan Vasquez in Panama City. Let's see if we can get Juan up from what has been a dangerous situation in his hotel. Juan, are you there? What do you see? What do you hear? What's happening?
Dan, from our window, we can hear machine gun fire and we can hear some sort of explosions. These are not around the hotel and not inside the hotel. We can hear them. They sound distant, but somewhere in the city. We also still hear shouting inside the hotel, so we have to be quiet now.
Juan will, of course, respect that, try to get back to you later. As U.S. tanks and truckloads of U.S. troops are reported rumbling into Panama City, and as fighting is reported with aircraft, including helicopter support, now reported overhead. Let's go to the White House, and again, our CBS News White House correspondent, Wyatt Andrews. Wyatt, what is the basis for U.S. action in Panama, as I assume now that we continue to wait at the White House for an official statement, which is expected momentarily?
Dan, they have been working on that basis, especially the legal basis, for such a move into Panama for some time now, reminding everyone that last Friday, the Justice Department came out with an unusual and very novel legal justification saying that U.S. troops could be employed outside of American borders to go get indicted drug lords. That's point 1 on the legal justification, and there was an adjunct to that that U.S. troops could also operate outside borders in self-defense to answer threats. It's important to note that over the weekend, given Noriega's declaration of war, the killing of the U.S. Marine, the sexual threatening of the Navy lieutenant's wife. All of that adds up to an atmosphere of threat against the United States that the president could conceivably cite. And of course, the other thing is that Noriega is an indicted drug lord, and I'm reminded that in his St. Martin's press conference on Saturday, the president, almost out of the blue, pointedly referred to Noriega as an indicted drug kingpin wanted for trial in the United States. It's important to note all this because for an administration that always looks very often to the polls for its justification, to how things are going to look, and to whether or not it can sell its policies, all of these tea leaves looking at the legal justification seem quite strong at this point.
Wyatt Andrews at the White House. As the United States forces have made an attack in Panama City, we want to bring you up to date as best we can as part of our CBS News live coverage of this fighting in Panama, which can be called a U.S. attack. The Panamanian Defense Forces and General Manuel Noriega said earlier that they were braced for, quote, an invasion, unquote. It remains to be seen whether that would be an apt and justified word under the circumstances, and we continue to stand by and wait for a statement from the White House, possibly a statement from President Bush. Mark the word possibly there. There's been no official confirmation that the president is going to have anything to say. CBS News was told some time ago that a statement, a U.S. government statement, was being prepared, and it possibly would come from the White House itself. So fighting is underway. Fires can be seen around the city, mortar shells heard, gunfire, including some automatic gunfire, planes and helicopters overhead. However, the scale of fighting, and this may be important, the scale of fighting remains unclear at this moment. It can be made to sound like that there's fighting everywhere in Panama City, when in fact that may not be the case. What we know, and all we know at the moment, is that U.S. forces have moved in Panama City. Gunfire can be heard, aircraft can be heard and seen. There are some fires, particularly around the headquarters of the Panamanian Defense Forces. If we can get our map up very quickly, you can see the rough outline here. The PDF, the Panamanian Defense Force barracks, is one place where gunfire has been heard. Another is around Fort Armador, which we've mentioned several times. One reason is that General Werner, our consultant here, who had command in this area not very long ago, said that Fort Armador, which is a joint fort of U.S. and Panamanian forces, was a place to watch, and fighting is reported there as we do this broadcast. Now, the man who all this is aimed at is Manuel Noriega, a mystery man who's been widely described as an international drug thug. Our correspondent Bob Thaw is here to talk about the Panamanian dictator and how he got to his position of power. Bob?
Dan, as far as the administration is concerned, Manuel Noriega has been living on borrowed time for several months now, but regardless of what happens in this current maneuver, this has not been the first time this year that the U.S. has flexed its military muscle in Panama. In mid-May, Bush administration dispatched 2,000 troops, most of them paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, to the small republic, after Noriega forces rigged voting in the country's presidential elections, and after his so-called Dobermans brutally assaulted victorious opposition leaders like Guillermo Billy Ford. But the American show of force 7 months ago didn't even ruffle the Panamanian strongman, who publicly thumbed his nose at U.S. policymakers and who, despite indictments for drug dealing and U.S. economic pressure which crippled the Panamanian economy, remained firmly in control and a persistent thorn in the side of official Washington. But in October, given the opportunity to help topple Noriega, the administration refused to provide all the military and logistical support requested by Panamanian soldiers who attempted a coup against the general. While American forces did block some access to Panamanian Defense Force headquarters, Noriega loyalists used other routes to reach and then rescue the embattled military boss, who proceeded to execute many of the plotters and continued to torment official Washington. And in the past, Noriega has led more lives than the proverbial cat. He has defied huge odds, has overcome superior numbers. This time, the administration is trying to guarantee that Noriega's luck has run out and that his time is up.
Thanks, Bob. Mortar, machine gun, and cannon fire now reported to be heard in Panama's capital of Panama City as U.S. tanks and truckloads of U.S. troops headed toward Panama's military headquarters. The U.S. military, the U.S. Army, is in action in Panama City. Gunfire and explosions heard particularly frequently in the vicinity of the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters. Noriega has offices there. Whether he is actually in those offices or not is unknown. Fort Clayton, which is 6-7 miles away, fighting has been reported around there. That's a U.S. base, Fort Clayton. Fort Amador, which is somewhat below that on the map, as you can see, jointly held by U.S. and Panamanian forces. Some of the earliest fighting was reported there. Juan Vasquez in Panama City, what's the latest you're hearing and seeing?
The Panamanian radio is announcing that the Yankees are invading Panama. The Yankees are invading Panama. The announcer sounds quite hysterical. He said, "Stay tuned, Panamanians. We will inform you of the troop movements of the Yankee invaders so that you can go out into the streets to stop them." They're saying it's a hostile act, it's aggression, we're being invaded. They periodically stop and play the national anthem. National TV is just showing a signal of the Panamanian flag.
If we can get our CBS News consultant, General Frederick Warner, up quickly, we'll ask him about these reports. General Warner, as this situation develops now, let's update ourselves on what we should be looking for, and on the basis of the very sketchy reports you've heard so far, give us an outline of what appears to be happening.
Yes, we should be watching two specific areas. First, Manuel Antonio Noriega's headquarters in Panama City, and secondly, Fort Amador, because while that is a shared base with Panama and the United States, it is also his secondary headquarters and the home of one of the companies most loyal to him. It appears to me that while we might have initiated our military deployments as a show of force, that something prompted their commitment, and yet from what we hear, realizing that the first report is always inaccurate, it seems as if it's unfolding based on a response to conditions rather than in accordance with a specific plan.
General, there were reports. Juan Vasquez told us before we began this live CBS News report of the fighting in Panama City that several Panamanian military forces had said to him that the Panamanians had started to disperse their best troops, those most loyal to Noriega, about a day and a half, maybe 2 days ago, to put them in various parts of the city rather than run the risk of having them trapped in their barracks.
That sounds very logical, Dan. They would be most vulnerable if they stayed within their barracks or quartels to isolation. Noriega's strategy would be to relocate those, first so the American forces would not know where they are, and secondly so they could respond to reinforce him as required.
General, you studied this situation many times, having that command there. Earlier this evening on the CBS Evening News, you indicated you did not think in the end that if U.S. forces moved, that it was very likely to be done without some heavy fighting and loss of life. On the basis of what you've heard, you have any reason to change that?
At this stage, no, I do not have reason to change. I believe that while there may be some surrenders among the Panamanian Defense Forces, Noriega has probably been successful in propagandizing them that they fear the consequences of surrender, and thus a significant proportion will probably remain loyal to him, at least for the immediate future.
Now, as the fighting continues in Panama City, General, quickly sketch for us differences between the situation in Panama and the situation in Grenada, where U.S. forces, not without some difficulty, but eventually overwhelmed a force in a matter of, well, 2 days at most.
One of the basic differences, of course, was in the nature of the intervention. That was an intervention launched from the United States and air delivered straight into Grenada. Here, apparently, from what we have learned so far, the forces were introduced pacifically into an American base and now seem to be moving out of that base into downtown Panama. Secondly, the forces are quite different. The Grenadian forces, even though reinforced with the Cubans, could not be compared to the Panamanian Defense Force. It is larger and more capable, but nevertheless still well within the capabilities of a small U.S. expeditionary force.
And emphasizing that point that the United States has not only the Panama Canal Zone area, its own bases within Panama off of which to operate, which we did not have in Grenada at the time of that.
Correct. Also, another major consideration is that in Panama we had a pre-positioned force that is being reinforcing. In Grenada, we had to introduce the entire force.
General, there is a report now of, in addition to mortar fire and automatic weapons fire, cannon fire. What kind of cannon fire would that be? The Panamanian forces certainly have some cannon.
I would suspect that the word cannon is probably being used loosely. If it is emanating from the Panamanian bases, it is probably rocket fire rather than cannon fire. If it's coming from the U.S. side, it could be cannon in that there are 105 millimeter howitzers available to the troops. But in a situation like this, distinguishing the sounds of various weapons is a very sporty proposition.
Thank you, General Warner. We'll be back to you as situation develops. Juan Vasquez is still on the phone, we hope, in Panama City. Juan, update us on what you see and hear.
There have been no new developments, Dan. We still hear some shouting in the hotel. We know that the armed men that entered the hotel earlier are still here. And we still hear the sound of distant automatic weapons fire. There seems to be nothing new. The radio is still asking Panamanians to go into the streets and stop the Yankee invader. They are announcing that there is an invasion underway right now.
So far, there has been silence from official U.S. government sources, understandable with a military operation underway. A United States military operation is underway in Panama. An attack by U.S. forces apparently underway, aimed at several precise targets in Panama City and around there, fighting between Panamanian and U.S. forces. So far as can be determined, the engagement so far, one would want to stop short of calling it widespread combat or a widespread engagement, because the only information that has been confirmed indicates that while there's fighting in 3, 4, or 5 places, we don't have an accurate picture of on what scale that fighting is taking place. Wyatt Andrews at the White House, any further indication of when we might expect some official U.S. government statement, whether it's to come from President Bush or not?
None of that, Dan. The situation here is the same, and perhaps that's a bit significant at this point, recalling that reporters were summoned to the White House a little bit more than an hour ago, and there was indication at one point that, that whatever statement was coming from the White House would come at 1 a.m. Eastern Time. We're 30 minutes beyond that. It's probably fair to deduce at this point, because as you point out, this military operation is going on, that, the president or whomever is going to speak for the administration wants to get reports on how things are proceeding before they come out here.
Wyatt, why now? First of all, why the operation and why now?
Well, Bob, remember, in the Bob Fall report that we broadcast a few minutes ago, remember that the president did not move any troops or did not move violently against Noriega following the beating of the elected presidential and vice presidential candidates. He was accused of hesitancy then. Recall, too, that...
Have your attention, please.
There's an announcement, Dan.
Mr. Fitzwater will brief in 5 minutes. It will be on camera and for sound. Thank you.
Dan, in case you did not hear that, we've been put on 5 minutes notice that tonight's announcement will come from Marlon Fitzwater, and it will be on camera. Again, probably little doubt at this point this is about Panama.
Wyatt, what do we know about what's happening in the White House Situation Room, the central military and intelligence control room at the White House?
Right. We know that it has been up and functioning throughout this evening, Dan. We know that, I'm not quite sure exactly who chaired it, but I know that at one point Vice President Quayle was called back to the White House, so you'd have to presume that, that he was called there. I have sort of made the rounds here throughout the evening and noticed the lights on all night in General Scowcroft's office, the National Security Advisor. So I think it's fair to say that, that throughout this evening, the Situation Room has been up and staffed by the very top levels of this administration.
And Wyatt, has it been confirmed that Defense Secretary Cheney has been at the White House this evening and has been in the Situation Room?
Not in specific terms, Dan. The one that I did have confirmed was Vice President Quayle.
Any significance attached to the announcement that Marlin Fitzwater, the White House press secretary, will be making the announcement rather than the president himself?
Pure guesswork on this at this point, but I think that if the White House were able to claim that they had in fact snatched Noriega and had him in custody, you could guess that you'd have the president out here. The fact that, and again, pure speculation, if Marlin Fitzwater is briefing, it's probably to announce that the operation is in progress.
Wyatt Andrews standing by at the White House and waiting for an announcement that now has been, there's been an official announcement, perhaps you heard it over the speaker, at the White House that within a few minutes, when the announcement was made, they said 5 minutes, we probably have 2.5 minutes to go, there'll be some official information coming from the White House. Tomorrow morning's headlines are likely to read, fighting in Panama, U.S. troops move toward military headquarters. Many of your morning papers, of course, will not have anything on this because it's happening so very early in the morning, but that will be the headline tomorrow. This is, by anyone's estimate now, a major story. That does not mean there necessarily has been major fighting, although it's very clear that some fighting is underway, and you heard Wyatt Andrews say that if it had been a quick and decisive move by U.S. troops all over in a matter of minutes or, say, an hour, that it's likely that there would have been some announcement by this time. However, under these circumstances, best to keep guesswork, speculation at a minimum. We'll have some official announcement in a moment. We do know that mortar, machine gun, and cannon fire has been heard in Panama City. You heard General Warren a few moments ago say that it's common in reporting these kinds of things to confuse cannon fire with rocket fire, and so there may or may not have actually been cannon fire. We know that U.S. air cover has been up over the city, aircraft and helicopters. There's been gunfire and explosions heard in various areas in and around Panama City, including around the Defense Forces headquarters, the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters, where Noriega has his offices. Whether he's in there or not, no one has said. Gunfire heard near the U.S. base Fort Clayton, just north of the city. Gunfire also heard in and around Fort Armador. Wyatt Andrews at the White House, is the indication there, and I recognize what a limited space and what a limited information you have, is this is to be an extensive statement and question and answer, or do we know?
Dan, we heard one rumor on that, and that it was earlier, and that it was a 1.5-page statement. But again, I must characterize that as a rumor. And again, keep in mind that with a military operation in progress, it may be that he is just coming out here for a straight report and not any prepared statement on what is going on. It may just be a straight report from Mr. Fitzwater of the state of play at the moment.
Mr. Fitzwater's briefing is about to begin.
All right, Dan, I'm sure you heard that. They tell us now that Mr. Fitzwater's briefing is about to begin. They're physically unlocking the door, which they have kept locked throughout this evening. But we expect Marlin Fitzwater momentarily. Apparently they're not being very successful at opening it, Dan. They locked it to keep us from being too inquisitive, and now they have it open.
This is CBS News Live coverage of the fighting in Panama, and this is live from the White House. Marlin Fitzwater expected to make the first official U.S. government statement about the fighting in Panama. U.S. forces, including tanks, moving into Panama City and fighting reported there as the United States Army makes an attempt apparently against General Manuel Noriega. You say, well, why use the word apparently? Because no one has yet said what the purpose of this fighting is, what the purpose of the move is, but it seems fairly apparent. The wire services reports from the scene continue to pretty much confirm what we've known earlier. Now here's Marlin Fitzwater.
The President has directed United States forces to execute at 1:00 a.m. this morning pre-planned missions in Panama to protect American lives, restore the democratic process, preserve the integrity of the Panama Canal treaties, and apprehend Manuel Noriega. The situation in Panama under General Noriega has reached a crisis. Democratic elections have been thwarted. American lives have been endangered. The integrity of the Panama Canal treaties is at risk. General Noriega is under indictment for drug-related charges, and the President has made every effort peacefully to resolve the situation through negotiations under the auspices of the Organization of American States and Latin American leaders. General Noriega has rejected all of these efforts. Last Friday, Noriega declared a state of war with the United States. The next day, the PDF shot to death an unarmed American serviceman, wounded another, seized and beat another serviceman, and sexually threatened his wife. Under these circumstances, the President decided he must act to prevent further violence. Our troops will use only the force necessary to achieve the objectives and will be withdrawn as quickly as possible. At approximately midnight tonight, the democratically elected leaders of Panama, President Endara and Vice Presidents Calderon and Ford, were sworn in and assumed their rightful positions. They welcome and support our actions and have stated their intention to institute a democratic government immediately. The United States has recognized that government and will restore normal relations and will cooperate to rebuild a free and prosperous Panama. I'll be glad to take a few of your questions.
Why hasn't General Noriega been captured yet, Marlon?
This operation began at 1 o'clock. The situation on the ground is such that we are not at liberty at this point to comment on any of the details of the military undertaking. The operation is ongoing. We don't know how long it will take, but that is our ultimate objective. It has not happened at this time.
Marlon, on what legal basis was this operation undertaken?
The legal basis was, first of all, the President's responsibility and duty to protect the lives of American citizens. We have laid out in the past the number of threats to American citizens and to U.S. servicemen. There have been literally hundreds of cases of harassment, of abuse, and of situations that have caused us to believe very greatly that there is a threat to American citizens, there is a threat to our rights under the Canal Treaty, and the President has acted on that basis.
Is the President acting under intelligence reports that this operation has a guarantee or certainty of success?
The certainty of an undertaking like this is something that we obviously have confidence in. We would not undertake a military action that we did not believe was well planned and had a high degree and high chance of success.
Is this being done in conjunction with any of the Panamanian Defense Forces? In other words, are any of the Noriega forces joining in the U.S. effort to oust Noriega?
As I indicated, this operation began just less than a half an hour ago. There are no indications of those kinds of changes in the conflict that I can report at this time.
But was there any planning in conjunction with the Panamanian Defense Forces, or is this solely a U.S. operation?
I can't comment on those kinds of planning operations.
Organization of American States is urging the President not to do this. He's gone ahead and done it. Have you talked to the OAS? Have you had any change of heart from the OAS? Any indications of how they're going to feel about this?
The OAS, as you will recall, considered this matter considerably following the May elections in Panama. The elections, as you also know, were thwarted by General Noriega. All of America saw the bloody shirt and body of Billy Ford and the others who were beaten by General Noriega in the aftermath of that election. And the OAS was very forceful in their consideration of this issue. And they sent a mission to Panama to try to urge the termination of the Noriega regime, and they passed a resolution urging that it be ended by September 1st. This evening, President Bush, Vice President Quayle, and Secretary of State Baker are calling various leaders of Latin American countries, members of the OAS, as well as allied leaders and others. We believe we do have support of the OAS and the Latin American countries. Nick?
Does the fact that a step towards handing over the canal to the Panamanians is scheduled to occur on January 1st have anything to do with the timing of this operation now?
I don't think it has to do with the timing, but it certainly has to do with the substance. We do have a responsibility under the Panama Canal Treaty for its safety and security, and we do believe there have been threats that jeopardize the security of the treaty, and that is one of the aspects of our purpose here.
Can you, I know the operation is as yet incomplete, but can you give us any details of A, how it's going, B, what the size of the U.S. force that was amassed for this was, and how long you think this operation may take?
I really can't answer any of those questions in any great detail. The United States is committing forces that we believe are adequate to the task. It is a major undertaking. There are numbers of troops and equipment that have been dedicated to this task, and but I just want to wait until some later point to give any kind of logistical characterization of the size.
To go ahead with this.
The President, of course, has been considering this matter for several days. As you all know, he was quite disturbed by the events of last weekend involving the killing of the United States Marine and the harassment and threats to the naval officer and his wife. The President reviewed this issue with his national security advisors on Sunday afternoon. They considered options, developed a plan, and the President made the basic decision to proceed with this action. Since then, there have been any number of meetings. I will not go into details of when and how they were conducted, but the President has been reviewing this matter on a continual basis since Sunday, and there really has not been any question about our willingness or our readiness to proceed since that time. Michael?
What are the troops' orders with regard to Noriega? Are they under orders to try to take him alive? And if they do, what do you want to do with him?
Their orders are to apprehend General Noriega, and our purpose is to return him to the United States for prosecution under our laws regarding drug trafficking. As you know, General Noriega was indicted in the Southern District of Florida in Miami and the Northern District in Tampa for drug trafficking. And we want to bring him to the United States for prosecution under that indictment. Bill?
Who swore in Dora, under what legal authority, and where is he now?
I don't know who swore him in. The legal authority, of course, was that they are the freely and openly elected leaders in the May elections, and they are assuming office on that basis. Let me do Helen?
Where are they now?
I don't have their exact location. Let's go. Helen, go ahead.
Since this is a declaration of war, this is war, why didn't the President come out and announce it himself? And what has Congress to do it? Under our Constitution, I understand the Congress declares war.
The declaration of war was set by Panama, not by the United States. So don't get that confused. The President is acting here to safeguard American lives, to protect the Panama Canal Treaty, to secure the person who's under indictment for drug trafficking, but the only declaration of war has been on the side of the Panamanians.
Will be
John.
Marlon, can you give
John.
us your initial information on casualties, please?
Have no information.
Is the President
Steve.
looking for...
Marlon, what's the legal basis here of what we've done in terms of a declaration of war? Are we basing this on the fact that Noriega declared war against us? And how has Congress been informed? Can you give us an idea?
We are basing this on the actions outlined in this statement, which is a pattern of aggression in recent days that we think is quite threatening to American citizens in Panama. There are some 35,000 Americans there, as I recall, roughly 35,000 Americans in Panama, in a pattern of harassment and threats going back almost a year that involves literally hundreds of cases. I'll try to provide you some details on that later. And on the President's strong feeling that we need to uphold the indictment and to move in this fashion.
How has Congress been informed?
The President has telephoned earlier this evening. The leadership of the Congress, Michael, Foley, Mitchell, Dole, other members of the Armed Services Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, Intelligence Committees are being called this evening, and they are all receiving briefings and information on the actions being taken. Their initial reaction has been supportive. The President has talked to them briefly, but did outline our purposes in much the same words that I have used here, and we have only heard support. John?
Any final ultimatum, directly or indirectly, to Noriega in the last few hours, Marlon?
Our ultimatum is as stated, that we are there to apprehend him and bring him back to America for prosecution.
Was any attempt made to communicate with him or to warn him or to say, look, this is what's going to happen if you don't quit?
No. Tim?
Marlon, where's the President monitoring the events, and who is with him now?
The President is in the Oval Office and also in his study, which is right off the Oval Office. Governor Sununu has been with him much of the evening. General Scowcroft has been there much of the evening. Secretary Baker was there for a short time. But Robert Gates, the Deputy National Security Advisor, has convened the deputies group. He did that earlier this evening. They are meeting continually through this crisis, and they will continue to do that. Mr. Gates is providing minute-by-minute updates as he receives them, and the President is monitoring this through other channels that are associated with the presence of General Scowcroft.
Vice President, is he here?
The Vice President is here. He is in his office, and he is making phone calls at this time to various world leaders. Owen?
Do we know the whereabouts now of Noriega, and are U.S. forces under strict orders not to shoot him or to injure him in any way?
I just can't comment, Owen, on the location of General Noriega or what we do know about him. And that would jeopardize the mission. I just could not offer any comment.
What about the question of whether there are strict orders not to shoot him or injure him, to make sure that he's apprehended alive?
The orders are to apprehend General Noriega. I would not go beyond that. Robert.
Is Indira in the U.S. or in Panama?
Pardon?
President Indira, is he in this country or in Panama?
He's in Panama. Mick.
Marlon, while the Panamanian Defense Forces perhaps may not measure up to U.S. forces, nevertheless, they're 6,500 strong. They're not necessarily a pushover by any means. Yet you said tonight that there was pretty much assurance on the part of the administration that this mission would be successful. That indicates that there may have been some communications with PDF forces to either participate or perhaps not resist. Was there any kind of communication with PDF forces beforehand?
I did not use the word assurance. I said that we would not undertake such a mission if we did not feel confident that we could carry it out successfully. I'm not aware of any communications directly with the PDF. Two more questions. Chris?
Marlon, you said the forces will be withdrawn as quickly as possible. They will not be withdrawn until we have captured Noriega. We're prepared to keep him there as long as he's out.
We are not willing to specify how long or in what circumstances they would be remaining there. Jerry?
Marlon, can you tell us who's got operational control? Is it being handled at Southcom? Is it being handled here?
Operational control is in the Pentagon. Let me just do one last thing on briefings, that I would expect the next detailed briefing to be operationally oriented and related to logistics, and that will come from the Pentagon. We do not have a time yet. I would not anticipate it soon, probably later in the morning. I don't think there's any need for you all to stay here the rest of the night, but you might want to hang around for a while anyway. Helen, one final question.
Operation seems oriented, and you're sending massively troops in to get one man.
There are four objectives to this. Getting General Noriega out is certainly one of the main ones.
That is the objective, isn't it?
It certainly is an objective, yes. Thank you very much.
Live from the White House in Washington, Marlon Fitzwater, the White House press secretary, announcing much of what was already known, and that is that U.S. troops, including armor and air cover, have moved into Panama City and the surrounding areas, hoping to, as Marlon Fitzwater said, to capture General Manuel Noriega. U.S. troops with their armor are now reported by the Associated Press and by other sources in Panama to have surrounded General Manuel Noriega's headquarters They did so in a blaze of gunfire very early this morning. Again, repeating for emphasis, it is unknown whether General Noriega is in his headquarters or not. Opposition leader Guillermo Endara proclaimed himself the new president of Panama, and you heard Marlin Fitzwater speaking for President Bush and officially for the United States government say that the United States now recognizes Endara as the leader of Panama as U.S. forces move in combat against Noriega. Mortar, machine gun fire, cannon fire echoed across Panama City. Truckloads of U.S. troops headed from U.S. military bases. Remember, there are U.S. bases in Panama. They moved off those bases toward the Panamanian Defense Force headquarters. One U.S. soldier who stopped reporters along a road about 2 miles north of Panamanian Defense headquarters said, and I quote, "We're kicking, bleep that word, tonight," unquote. In a radio broadcast shortly after the fighting broke out, Endara, remember he's the opposition leader to Noriega, called on the Panamanian forces to surrender peacefully and accept his electoral victory in May 7th balloting. Now, David Martin, our CBS News Defense Department correspondent, is standing by at the Pentagon. David, what kind of operation are we talking about?
Well, I think we're talking about an operation which is going to keep U.S. forces flowing into Panama, out of the bases there, into the city, until they think they have this situation under control. The determining factor here is going to be the loyalty of the Panamanian Defense Forces. How many of them stay loyal to Noriega and fight? How many of them throw down their arms? And I'm sure that this operation has been constructed in such a way so that the units believed to be loyal to Noriega will be the targets that they go after first to try to seal them off. I would also be almost certain that General Noriega, wherever he is having a hard time communicating right now, because I'm sure the U.S. is doing everything it can to interfere with his telephone and radio communications. Although his defense headquarters are surrounded, that of course does not necessarily mean he is there. He has a number of other locations where he spends the night and also uses as an office in Panama. He has some very sophisticated, or has had some very sophisticated security advisors, both Cuban and Israeli. So getting Noriega is not a piece of cake.
They don't want to dwell on this, but a lot of people will be surprised to hear that Noriega's had Israeli military advisors. No one's surprised he's had Cuban military advisors.
I was surprised to hear it today. I heard it today for the first time.
David, any indication what U.S. forces are engaged in combat now in Panama?
Well, only by inference, Dan. My understanding is that Ranger units from Fort Benning, Georgia, were among the first to move, and they moved last night. That being Monday night, now that we're into Wednesday, I guess. That, I think, would mean that they would be among the first to go in. Now, whether or not additional Ranger units were airdropped into some locations in the canal zone, I don't know, but that would be another option. We talked earlier about air cover, and reporters have talked about seeing C-130 transport planes there. Well, C-130s can also be rigged to serve as gunships and put out a very high rate of fire, and if you had a gunship circling, say, a barracks where you believe that a unit loyal to Noriega was based, that unit would have a very hard time getting out of there in one piece.
David, on the basis of what we know and we've been able to piece together, is it or is it not the case that what's being attempted is massive, overwhelming force to get this done as quickly as possible?
I think that's right. I mean, it's what military officers want when they're planning an operation. They want overwhelming force and they want the element of surprise. In this case, they couldn't get the element of total surprise because, of course, they had to move so many forces into Panama, and Noriega has lots of ways of finding out what was going on, and as we saw earlier this evening, some of the activity was visible to any reporter who drove through Howard Air Force Base. So total surprise could not be achieved. You make up for what you lose in surprise by throwing in extra amounts of force.
David Martin at the Pentagon. We'll remind those of you who may have just joined us as CBS News live coverage of the fighting U.S. forces in combat against Panamanian forces in Panama City. Now, Marlin Fitzwater, in making the official announcement from the White House just a short while ago, said he wasn't going to get into operational details. He said that those would be addressed at the Pentagon in a briefing sometime later on. We know not what time. We would, of course, expect to carry it on this CBS station. CBS Radio, a short time ago, talked by telephone with a resident of Panama City. We don't have his name, but he says that he lives a few miles from the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters. This was his account of the U.S. attack.
The noise was very, very clear when there was flak oh, there it goes again. You can hear, now again you can hear the report of fire. Somebody's fighting or at least firing, I suppose, to the airplanes. It would sound like they are shooting at the aircraft.
Now, stations on the West Coast along our CBS television network may be leaving us now, so we're going to pause for a second and let them cut away for their late local news. Mind you, we expect to be on the air after your late local news. Meanwhile, our CBS News special coverage will continue after we take a 2-beat pause. Fighting continuing in Panama City. You may recall that previously, when an effort was made not too long ago by Panamanian forces to overthrow Noriega themselves. You remember that situation in which Noriega, for at least a short while, was a prisoner in his own barracks. What happened there, U.S. forces did not go on the attack. As you recall, they were used to block roadways, and they didn't block all the roadways, which is one reason Noriega's forces were able to use an airport and a roadway that was not blocked by U.S. forces to come in relief of him and rescue Noriega. That was the situation in which President Bush and his staff were criticized, fairly or unfairly at the time, for not being completely organized and not being as decisive as they might have been. That is all water under the bridge at the moment. We have a situation this evening where members of the U.S. military, United States sons, daughters, fathers, and mothers are fighting in Panama. The full extent of the combat we do not know, but they are engaged in combat, and in some places there have been, has now been continuous fire, mortar fire, automatic weapons fire, and in some cases what was reported to be cannon fire, but may turn out to be rocket fire, hard to distinguish between the two, has been underway for over 2 hours, beginning about midnight tonight, Eastern time. On the phone now is another eyewitness to the fighting in Panama. He doesn't want his name used. However, can we ask, sir, what is happening? What do you know is happening at the moment?
Yes, hello?
Yes, hello. What's happening right now, please?
Well, right now we have a fighter in the street with guns, gunfire, and bombs. I think that there was bazookas, no? And
rockets, perhaps.
Rockets, yes, perhaps. And we have fire of the houses near the quarter. I saw in my window the resplendor, you know, and I think that the thing will going for more to in decrease, you know, because when this thing began, it was most harder. Right now we have sporadic shooting, and I hear some men said that surrender. I don't know what happening outside because we don't have light, and we can see nothing. And you know, it is a risk. All the Panamanians are in their houses, in the floor. I am in the floor, but I don't saw or any house get bomb or fire of the guns. You know?
Yes.
Any question?
Yes. Have you seen anyone killed or wounded?
No, I don't see here anyone killed or wounded. If anybody will go and kill or wounded, I can know because I am near here and I can see it. But I don't see nothing like this. You know, a friend of mine called me and said that in Radio Caracol, Colombia, said that, I don't know, can be true or false that they took Noriega. I don't know.
Well,
but I think that the quarter is under control of other people.
I understand. Thank you very much, sir. Good luck to you as the fighting continues in Panama City. 2 points. One, there is absolutely no indication of confirmation of what that gentleman in Panama City indicated that he had heard as a rumor that Noriega had been captured. There's no official confirmation anywhere that U.S. forces on the attack in Panama now in a combat situation have located Noriega, much less have him under custody. Marlin Fitzwater, in the official announcement from the White House, indicated that was the goal, that's the purpose of this mission, this attack into Panama, what Noriega's forces are calling an invasion of their country by U.S. forces. The goal, according to Fitzwater, was to take Noriega, to take him alive as possible, bring him back to the United States to face trial on the drug charges, the drug indictment that was handed down some time ago in Miami. Joining us now is our CBS News Consultant General Frederick Warner, who recently retired as Chief of U.S. Southern Command in Panama just this last October. From what you've been hearing, General, what is the situation based on your experience in Panama? What's happening there at the moment?
I believe we are receiving only the most fragmented information, and that given that the administration has announced a deliberate invasion with the 4 objectives, that there is undoubtedly much more going on than is reaching us. The reports of activity at Fort Amador and troops encircling the headquarters of Manuel Antonio Noriega are most certainly 2 logical elements of a plan, but I am certain that there is much more activity going on in Panama City, but we just have not received news of it yet.
You indicate you think that there's much more fighting going on than we know about.
Not necessarily fighting, but there would certainly be more military objectives associated with the capture of Noriega and the other 3 objectives than just the surrounding of the headquarters and the isolation of the troops at Fort Amador.
I want to make sure I don't misunderstand or misinterpret what it is you're saying, that the indication, and that's all you can get from the fragmentary reports, is that there are other objectives, such as taking control of a certain part of the country or all of the country or a certain part of the city. I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean.
The objective of capturing Noriega is more complex than merely assaulting his headquarters and isolating the 1 company that is stationed at Fort Amador. So what I'm suggesting is that there is almost certainly other maneuvers going on, but because of their location or communications failures or for whatever reason, we have just not yet become aware of them.
General, is it or is it not indicative of how the fighting is going that, 1, President Bush himself did not make the announcement that Marlin Fitzwater was sent out to do it, and 2, that no operational details have been given?
I don't believe that we can measure success or failure yet in terms of the President's failure to address the people, but rather that the status of the situation is so unclear that he will await a time when he can be more definitive in his assessment of the situation in Panama.
Would the President, or would he not, be in direct touch with the flag rank in command in Panama in this kind of situation?
Technologically, he could certainly have an open telephone line to the Commander-in-Chief in Panama. I would presume and hope that while the fighting is going on, they permit the military to do their job and not be answering questions to a multiplicity of actors in Washington.
How does that work, General? Once the President, in his case, the President says, okay, go get him, do it, it's the green light, the rest of it's up to you, or does the President or some of his people stay in pretty close touch?
Since World War II, it has been an ever-increasing direct involvement of the National Command Authority in Washington in field operations. And so we can anticipate that between Panama and the National Command Center in Washington, There is an open line and a steady stream of questions being sent down to Panama, a request for situation reports and updates and things like that. Long gone are the days when a military commander receives a mission and then is given the freedom to execute it.
General, thank you. We'll be getting back to you as time goes along. Standing by now at the White House, CBS News White House correspondent Wyatt Anders. Wyatt, why is President Bush not going to Congress? Let me put it this way. Why has he not gone to Congress to get authorization under the War Powers Act?
Dan, I'm quite sure that is a question many congressmen are going to put to him directly because, as I think we all could tell from the Marlin Fitzwater briefing, Congress did not get much lead time on this operation. They were probably informed just before the rest of the American public was via these broadcasts. And it's also clear that the White House seemed to try to steer clear of any declaration of the War Powers Act because of the Fitzwater justification of this attack on Noriega as saying that the president saw it as an action in defense of American lives. In other words, a self-defense action is not a declaration of war, and they took many, many pains to make that distinction. In any event, at the same time, Fitzwater claimed that those members of Congress that the president had contacted personally were supportive of what the president was doing. I'm sure we'll get the other side of that in the morning.
Updating now, U.S. military forces are in combat and have been for at least the last 2 hours and 10 minutes. According to the White House official announcement, the operation kicked off about midnight Eastern time. I want to correct myself there. I think the official announcement was a little unclear, but the official announcement may have set the kickoff time approximately 1 a.m. Eastern time. However, there were reports of U.S. troop movements well before that, certainly as early as 12 midnight Eastern time. Now let's pause and say that in a situation such as this, that even under the best of circumstances, and one would certainly hope that they are the best of circumstances for U.S. forces, that confusion reigns in the early hours of combat, wherever it may be and under what circumstances. There are those who would argue that any time in combat what you have is sort of mass confusion. And even with the best communications, the best technology operating, when this kind of situation gets underway, it takes a while to find out complete information. And as Marlin Fitzwater pointed out, many would say rightly so, patience is required here to get accurate information. Certainly the president would not want to be coming out and saying something that later proved to be inaccurate. There's been no indication thus far that the president is going to have anything to say anytime soon. However, we do expect to have a Defense Department, a Pentagon briefing about the operational details so far as the Defense Department and the administration is prepared to announce them sometime during this morning. But Marlin Fitzwater cautioned that that briefing may not come very soon. And as General Warner pointed out a few moments ago, while the Situation Room at the White House and the command centers in Washington are getting a constant flow of reports, some of them coming over an open telephone line from Panama, it's not always easy to determine exactly what the situation is. The early reports indicate that this is at least a fairly large-size operation. General Warner said a few moments ago that it now becomes increasingly apparent that perhaps there are other goals of the mission besides simply capturing General Noriega. David Martin, our veteran CBS News Defense Department correspondent, is standing by at the Pentagon. David, any indication from the Pentagon about how long this operation might last?
No, there isn't, Dan. I think there is a desire, as Marlin Fitzwater said, to get it over with as quickly as possible, but that's going to depend on a number of things. One, the whereabouts of Manuel Noriega. Has he been apprehended or is he still at large? And two, again, would be the loyalty to Noriega of the Panamanian Defense Forces. If Panamanian Defense Forces continue to hold out and fight, you're in a downtown situation in some cases. That can go on for quite some time, even when you have overwhelming forces, as the U.S. does in this instance. Remember also that it's dark down there, as it is here, and that only makes things more confusing. The U.S. military spends a lot of time, money, effort, and actually loses some lives training to fight at night, using night vision goggles, learning to fly at night, all of which is very difficult and very confusing, and is only going to make those reports coming in over that open phone line all the more difficult to understand, and they're going to need checking and double checking before it all comes out straight.
David, this kind of operation has been discussed for quite some while. Was there anybody in the Pentagon you talked to who felt that American casualties under this kind of operation could be kept very low?
Whenever you go into a situation where you use armed forces, a military commander will tell the Secretary of Defense, we're going to lose some people. They told that to Caspar Weinberger before the raid on Libya. I'm sure the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, told that to Secretary Cheney before this operation. And I'm sure he said that the level of casualties will depend in part on how much of a fight the Panamanian Defense Forces put up. But going into a situation like this, you have to count on losing people, if nothing else, just from accidents. You have probably thousands of troops maneuvering down there in the darkness, and accidents, mistaken identities, they're just bound to happen.
David, what are the telltale signs to look for now as this story develops and as eventually we'll have some kind of Pentagon briefing, emphasizing again that Fitzwater said don't expect it anytime soon? What should we be looking for as indicators of how this thing is going?
Well, from this part of the story in the U.S., I think if we see troops continuing to move out from places like Fort Ord in California, that will mean that more reinforcements are needed, that the commander on the scene doesn't feel he has enough force yet, and he needs more people in there. If we see planes continuing to leave from places like Travis Air Force Base in California outside San Francisco, I think that will be a sign that they do not think this situation is under control yet. Incidentally, we should mention the name of the commander, if it hasn't already been mentioned. The name of the commander in Panama who is in charge of this operation is General Max Thurman, a four-star Army general.
Any indication, David, that any of the airborne units have been used? We know that elements of airborne units at least were moved down there today.
No, I don't know that any units have been airdropped as opposed to flying into Howard Air Force Base, getting off C-130s or C-141 transport planes, and then moving out from there on the ground. I don't know that there have been any parachute drops. But as General Werner said, there is much more going on here than these isolated reports we are able to get from observers on the scene.
There's simply no longer any doubt that this is an effort to use massive and overwhelming force in various sections of the country, not just in Panama City per se.
I think that's right. If you look at a map of Panama, about 80% of the American forces are over on the Pacific side. But there are some U.S. forces and undoubtedly some Panamanian units over on the Caribbean side of the canal. And I think it's logical to assume that something's being done over there. It may be days before we find out what went on over there, because the main action really is in Panama City and wherever Manuel Noriega is.
As you look at the map, for those of you who are viewing our CBS News live coverage of U.S. forces on the attack in Panama, to the right side of your map, obviously, is the Caribbean side. The upper side or left side of the map would be the Pacific side. Now, most of the fighting we've heard about thus far has been toward the Caribbean side in and around Panama City. Fort Clayton, fighting reporting there. Fort Amador, a joint command, fighting reported there. And David Martin, if you're monitoring this, we now have report that residents who live near Fort Cimarron, that's about 20 miles from the capital of Panama City, Fort Cimarron, residents around it said helicopters, no indication of whose helicopters, were flying overhead there, and that fighting could be heard. Fort Cimarron is the home of Battalion 2000. That's one of those so-called elite Panamanian military units, one of the units that would be looked at as a possible key as to whether Noriega's best units are indeed going to put up a fight in support of him. Noting that Juan Vasquez reported some time ago, unconfirmed, but he reported a Panamanian source had told him that the forces most loyal to Manuel Noriega had sort of been peppered around the city, not kept in their barracks beginning about a day and a half or 2 days ago, anticipating some U.S. action, and that would indicate that if the Panamanian forces have been put in kind of neighborhood-by-neighborhood situation, if they stick to their mission, could resort to house-to-house fighting to eradicate. But the situation is perhaps best summed up so far by 3 young Panamanian soldiers who told one of our reporters, quote, I should say, called an AP reporter, quote, "There is all kinds of hell loose out there." Out there included sections of Panama City itself, areas around Panama City, military bases there, and at least as far away as 20 miles from Panama City. The government's national radio station said that the headquarters of the Panamanian Defense Forces had been, quote, "cruelly bombarded." Now, the United States has launched a military operation in Panama against General Manuel Noriega, even for those of you who may have joined us late. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater made the official announcement a few minutes ago.
The President has directed the United States forces to execute at 1:00 a.m. this morning pre-planned missions in Panama to protect American lives, restore the democratic process, preserve the integrity of the Panama Canal treaties, and apprehend Manuel Noriega. The situation in Panama under General Noriega has reached a crisis. Democratic elections have been thwarted. American lives have been endangered. The integrity of the Panama Canal treaties is at risk. General Noriega is under indictment for drug-related charges, and the President has made every effort peacefully to resolve the situation through negotiations under the auspices of the Organization of American States and Latin American leaders. General Noriega has rejected all of these efforts. Last Friday, Noriega declared a state of war with the United States. The next day, the PDF shot to death an unarmed American serviceman, wounded another, seized and beat another serviceman, and sexually threatened his wife. Under these circumstances, the President decided he must act to prevent further violence. Our troops will use only the force necessary to achieve the objectives and will be withdrawn as quickly as possible. At approximately midnight tonight, the democratically elected leaders of Panama, President Endara and Vice Presidents Calderon and Ford, were sworn in and assumed their rightful positions. They welcome and support our actions and have stated their intention to institute a democratic government immediately. The United States has recognized that government and will restore normal relations and will cooperate to rebuild a free and prosperous Panama. I'll be glad to take a few of your questions.
Yeah, how's it going?
Marlin Fitzwater, that was on videotape, recorded a few minutes ago, shortly before, shortly before 2 o'clock Eastern time this morning, as Marlin Fitzwater made the first official announcement confirming that U.S. military forces were on the attack in Panama, what the Panamanians call an invasion, moving off from several U.S. bases and locations inside Panama, keeping in mind that the United States dug the Panama Canal and controlled all of Panama for a long while. In fact, General Noriega has been claiming that the United States was trying to oust him solely because, as he put it, it can renege on the 1977 treaties. Now, those were the treaties. They had been in negotiations for a long time, but they were effected during the President Carter's administration, under which Washington, the United States, is to finally cede central control of the Panama Canal itself by the end of the century. Noriega has been arguing that the United States is trying to get at him simply because it wants to renege on those treaties. As you heard Marlin Fitzwater, speaking officially for the United States government and for the President of the United States, said that, in effect, that that has nothing whatsoever to do with it. The reasons are that Manuel Noriega has been indicted on charges of being an international drug person in Miami, and the United States wanted to move in, capture him so he can be brought to this country and tried on those charges. And to answer to a direct question, Fitzwater said that the goal was to take Noriega alive if possible. Fitzwater also pointed out that Noriega's rubber stamp legislature in Panama declared war on the United States as of last Friday, that a U.S. Marine officer, a young Marine officer, had been shot to death in Panama over the weekend, and Fitzwater ticked off some other, what he called a long string, that's a paraphrase, but a long string of harassments and injuries to U.S. citizens, including some military people in Panama, and he gave that as a further justification for the United States attack. Wyatt Andrews is at the White House. Wyatt, any idea when we might see Marlin Fitzwater again, or when the briefing on the operational military details will be held at the Pentagon?
Dan, there's no reading on that just yet. We have not gotten any information out of the White House apparatus since you saw Marlin Fitzwater depart. I suspect what will happen is that they will wait until the situation on the ground is a lot more clear before they give the operational details, for fear that they would expose too much over public airwaves. So it might not be till after dawn until we see the Pentagon briefing. As for Fitzwater himself, we are trying to determine here whether the president is still in the Oval Office. We have reason to believe that he might be. Mr. Fitzwater said in his briefing that the president was keeping tabs on this from